I live in northeast Oklahoma, and I consider myself a camping fishing enthusiast. One spring night, me and two friends decide to go fishing. It's around midnight. We're going to a place that was once a maintained primitive camping area. This is not a remote location, but it's not very well known either. As we approach the turnoff for our spot, we see another vehicle slowly turning out of it and proceeding in the way in which we came. We pass them, and a friend says how he figured no one else would be around. We get to our spot, get our gear out, and begin to prepare. As we chat, we all notice an unspoken uneasiness. Something is just not right. Usually I'm a trooper, fishing until the sun comes up, but I'm the first to crack. I explain to my friends how I feel, that we should leave, and I just have a bad feeling. They agree and we load up. While slowly driving through the old campground, we notice some brightly glowing embers in an area where no one has been. My friend driving stops without even thinking and goes for a look. He is startled, telling us to come see. What we saw was the remains of 3 crosses made of wood that would stand about 12 inches if upright, but they had been burned along with the small campfire. To make it even better, all were lying on freshly turned soil, which resembled a freshly dug grave. We freaked, got the heck out of there fast. When we approached the exit of the old campground, we notice a vehicle parked on the side of the road. We pass it and we all realize it's the same car we passed on the way in. There was no one in the car. They had doubled back and were likely watching us, waiting to do who knows what. Not a pro, but I've spent more than 1,000 days in the backcountry over the past decade. I have always been drawn to the wild. It seems like home, and I generally know my neighbors out there. Not afraid to be in the deep woods, in the dark. I love my woods. One sunny weekday afternoon, I had dirt biked up an old mining road. It gained a couple thousand feet from the valley floor towards one of the ridges of the Cascades. When the road gave out near the bottom of a high basin, I put on my backpack and started off cross-country toward the ridge. It was still heavily forested, old growth and old cut fading in another 1,000 feet into those old scraggly wind-blown ones near the top. About 20 minutes in and about half-mile up from me, near the tree line, I heard this thumping sound. It was very odd, so I stopped to listen carefully. It sounded like a big, solid branch was being whacked against a solid tree. I use the term solid because the hits were powerful. One or both of the pieces of wood were hard and dry. The wood resonated and rang on impact as dry wood will. I couldn't get over the power though. It sounded like someone was swinging a 4-inch post. Weird, right? Well, it gets better. This someone sounded like they were trying to communicate. The thumping had a very complex and well-defined pattern. And here's the weirdest part. The thumping signal occasionally became very rapid, like what a drummer could do if they were noodling around with a stick. But I swear it sounded like a 4-inch post was being treated as lightly as a drumstick. I listened for maybe 5 minutes, just fascinated with the sound, this code, and the power of it. Then the drumming suddenly stopped. I kinda woke up to the fear of this unknown thing out there. I had lots of stuff to protect me. I had my bear spray and my knife. I really only fear cougars, and even though I figure they'll have a bad day trying to take me down, still, the silence as I stared into the forest ahead seemed loaded, and I turned on my heels and left that valley. That place and that experience gave me the chills, and that high valley won't see my shadow again. I have heard stories about some of the native peoples around here having valleys that they just wouldn't go into. I can now easily understand how these legends get started. There was a group of teens that hadn't been heard from after their scheduled return time from a camping trip. A good friend and I know the area very well, so one of the search and rescue guys we're friends with called us in to assist in the search. He and I head out in the general direction the teens had set off in. We had been hiking for most of the day and seen nothing. We're about 35 kilometers into the woods at this point when we start noticing odd things. Sticks carved like spears stuck into the ground, weird carvings in the trees, a child's stuffed animal hanging from a noose up in a tree. This place was nowhere near any roads. It wasn't on the regular trails people would go on in the area. The really eerie thing was that everything was freshly carved. Somebody had been there within a couple hours of us and made these things. Mind you, we're still looking for these teens. We kept on hiking and eventually made camp for the night, still kind of on edge from what we had seen earlier. But we settled down anyway and got to sleep. We get up with the sunrise, hoping to cover more ground before it gets too hot. We pack up the gear and get ready to go when I noticed a bit of shirt that I'd caught on a small tree and wrapped along with some shoe prints. We were thinking, great, maybe we're close by the teens when a radio call comes through. The teens had just been found 20 kilometers east of us. They're calling everybody back. All those weird things we had seen from the day before came flooding back into my mind. We wasted no time hiking out of those woods. About a decade ago, while I was in the Boy Scouts, we went to a local Boy Scout summer camp to clean up after a storm. 4 other scouts and I were about 2 miles in the woods clearing vehicle, hiking, and walking trails. While working, we heard something on 2 legs about 50 yards off the trail. We all began to call out because it sounded like someone walking towards us, and we figured it was a scoutmaster. When we began calling out, the sound stopped. After a while, we went back to clearing the paths. Then we heard the thing in the woods make an odd sound and run through the woods. We were all fairly freaked out by this point, so we began heading back towards camp as a group, but we could hear the thing off in the woods running around us, making odd sounds. So we all huddled up and some younger scouts, myself included, began to freak out, and the 17-year-old in the group was also looking a bit worried. The thing in the woods sounded like a large man running through the woods, but making odd screeching sounds. As we got about a mile from camp, we began yelling, hoping the scoutmasters could hear us. The younger scouts were saying we should make a run for it, but our senior patrol leader told us not to so the thing wouldn't chase us like predators normally do. We continued the huddled fast walk, then we heard a truck coming down the path. This caused the young scouts to break rank and haul butt towards the truck. The senior patrol leader, quickly seeing his strength and numbers advantage in leaving, quickly started to run too. We finally saw the truck, which began to stop, and the local forest ranger got out of the truck and began yelling, "What's wrong? Is everyone okay?" We were all yelling, "Something is hunting us!" We all got to him at the truck and he was laughing. We turned around, and standing in the middle of the trail was a huge emu. Apparently, a local raises them for meat, and a few got out during the storm. According to experts, there are no such thing as black mountain lions. One day, while out with my dogs hunting mushrooms deep in the woods of northern Humboldt County, my dogs caught a scent and took off ahead of me. Before I can call them back, they were out of sight, and then I heard a horrible screaming sound, my dogs snarling and barking and squealing. By the time I got over the hill, they had 3 mountain lions in a tree, a mother and 2 large cubs. The mother and one of the cubs were jet black. One of my dogs had a severely mangled leg and shoulder, and puncture wounds to her neck, so I didn't stick around to observe, and I sure as heck didn't think to take any pictures. I scooped up my injured dog, slung her over my shoulders, and hiked the 3 miles back to where I'd left my car and rushed her to the vet. While she was in surgery to amputate her leg, my vet's husband, who is a Forest Service worker, came in the office. He had heard about the attack and wanted to ask me about the location and details. When I told him about the black mountain lions, he told me that there are no black mountain lions. He refused to believe me and treated me as if I were crazy. After my baby girl was settled and resting back at home, I proceeded to start making calls to park departments, colleges, cat sanctuaries, anyone who I thought might have some information. Every expert I talked to had the same reaction. They told me black mountain lions do not exist. and treated me like I was crazy. I know what I saw, and there are at least 2 black mountain lions in the world. My scariest wilderness encounter was at about 2 a.m. while maintaining a fire line on a 300-acre fire caused by a lightning strike. I needed to use the restroom, and the rule is you don't relieve yourself on the fire. So I walked over towards a stump outside the fire line. I was about 50 feet from the stump when it walked away. It was a black bear. My grandfather used to be the equivalent of a ranger down in Mexico. He was in charge of patrolling the farms and lands mainly due to people growing illegal greenery. One day, he said he was patrolling this ranch late at night and he heard a baby crying. Now the land is pretty flat, so he looked all ways and saw nothing, maybe some goats out in the far. As he is walking his route, he hears the same sound, looks up in the sky, and he swears he saw a witch, with black clothing and everything flying towards a mountain. He panicked, ran to his car, and drove off as fast as he could. So I was a guide for a while, and I have a good deal of experience on my own as well. During a training session, I was about to do a 300-foot rappel down a rock face alongside a waterfall that was notorious for deaths. Normally, the program I worked for tried to do these with a fireman's belay at the bottom, but for training purposes I was going down without, as it's not an incredibly high-risk activity if you know what you're doing, but it can be very frightening, especially in the first few seconds over the edge. Anyways, for the entire time we were setting up our lines, and in the few minutes before I went down, I just kept hearing this very, very faint drum. It was not a heartbeat, and it was not anything wrong with my body. I swear to you, I could hear a drum, and no one else heard it. Very faint, and almost had a changing pace. I thought it was the darn drums of death or something. I don't know if that counts as weird or scary, but it freaked me out, and I've never heard it before then or since. I used to do wilderness forestry in the Linville Gorge area of North Carolina. A jack-o'-lantern is a disembodied light that floats in the air. They are commonly reported in the southern Appalachians, but reports are usually disregarded because it's easy to imagine that the person seeing them was something more mundane. I have seen a few things that I suspect were jack-o'-lanterns, but there was one that was plain and clearly just a free-floating light out in the open on the east side of Short-Off Mountain, where there are no trails in a place that can be easily accessed by someone with good mountaineering skills and woodcraft. Furthermore, it was floating above brush way too thick for anything to move quickly and smoothly through it if it was walking on the ground. I should point out that there is a confirmed similar phenomenon nearby, the Brown Mountain Lights, that has puzzled people for centuries. On hot summer nights, you can sit at Wise Man's View or a pull-off on a highway east of the gorge and see jack-o'-lanterns dance along Brown Mountain Ridge yourself. I used to explore abandoned houses with my buddy in the middle of nowhere as a kid when I lived for a couple of years in North Dakota. One house had clearly been abandoned for at least 4 years or so. The door to the upstairs was locked from the inside, so we pulled the truck up to the porch, climbed onto the roof, opened the window and went inside. Inside we found a bed with a mattress that had all of the cloth removed, only springs. On it were about 50 emptied or used wallets. Next to the bed was an old trunk filled with weird astrological and cult papers. We left very quickly. Well guys, let me know what you think about these stories. Drums appear to be a common sound in the woods. I know I've heard them. Comment below which was your favorite, and subscribe for even scarier stories. Remember, sleep well.